Of course, the biggest heist in Canadian history is about maple syrup. Let's get into it. It's the year 2011 in Quebec. This region produces about 70% of the world's maple syrup. It's a big business, and that business is ran by the Federation of Quebec Maple Syrup Producers. So that's a real thing. And that thing is the governing body of all things maple syrup. You want to sell syrup in Quebec, you have to go through them. And to go through them, you have to play by their rules, which include production quotas. If you don't meet them, they fine you. If you overproduce, they confiscate it, and it gets stored out in the Global Strategic Maple Reserve. Oh, Jesus. They treat syrup how OPEC treats oil, but it gives people diabetes instead. This is the most Canadian shit I've ever heard. I'm just picturing mobsters wearing Canadian tuxedos at the bar, and there's a moose bartending for some reason. They're all talking about how to get more product out of their producers like a racket, and they do not care how you feel about it. I mean, the head of the Federation said this.
Why I have to feel bad because this man products outside of regulation and going on the TV and he cry a bit. Why I have to feel bad of that?
They act like a cartel. I mean, the definition of a cartel is an association of manufacturers or suppliers with the purpose of maintaining prices at a high level and restricting competition. Between that attitude and the definition, they are a cartel. If it looks like a moose and smells like a moose, yeah? No. Well, anyway, they are backed by law, so I guess it's a legal cartel, but still, I mean, come on. They have a ever-growing global strategic diabetes reserve, so they need a new warehouse. This warehouse didn't have any security, just a fence. But no security, no problem. It just means it's probably cheap, and who would steal maple syrup? That's what the Federation thought anyway.
At that time, you have to imagine that who wants to thief maple syrup?
Normally, I would agree, but there was a truck with over $100,000 that was stolen a short time before this big heist.
I'm Wilfred Brimley, and I'd like to talk to you for a few minutes about diabetes.
And back in 2006, a warehouse was robbed of a $1.3 million worth of the stuff. Speaking of the big heist, it all started because one of the owners of the warehouse was this man, Avit Caron, soon to be a legal syrup seller, actively being sued for scamming as an insurance agent at the time that they signed the lease. Also, he was previously found guilty of fraud but served no jail time. In the spring of 2011, a truck driver by the name of Sebastian Jutras,
I transport maple syrup.
he arranged a meeting at a truck stop and introduced him to the nemesis of the Federation, Richard Valieris. Hold on.
Vallière.
Oh, come on. I don't even have that key on my keyboard. Anyway, he's accumulated over $1.8 million in fines. During that meeting, Vallières thought he was being set up at first, since in 2011 it was apparently a lean year syrup-wise for producers and such, and yet this dude comes out of nowhere offering cheap syrup with a seemingly limitless quantity. Vallières even asked Caron, listen, are you working for the Federation for Christ's sake? That is a direct quote from a police interview. Being how the Federation well-deservingly hated him, how could you blame him? But Caron told him to mind your business. You want the syrup, then that's it. You have it. Also a direct quote. Jutras and Vallières even had a discussion about this deal. We all know the barrels were coming from the Federation, but we didn't use the word theft. And they made an agreement, and each person got a burner phone to stay in contact with the group. The plan was to rent some warehouse space to reduce suspicion and them being around there all the time, while they started siphoning out some syrup from the barrels and replaced it with water. So they just started off by skimming off the top. You fill up some barrels, you give it to Vallières to sell to his network on the black market. Part of whatever the fuck. Part of his network was a buyer by the name of Etienne St. Pierre, who was an out-of-jurisdiction reseller from New Brunswick. He has bought from Richard before, so it was easy to make a deal, and he would sell it everywhere except Ontario, and did just that, even going down to Vermont, always in small shipments to avoid suspicion by the smaller distributors that were buying it. And things were going smoothly, so smoothly, in fact, they decided to scale up. And by January of 2012, they began hiring people and using Jutris's truck company to ship everything to a sugar shack across town. A sugar shack is just where they process the syrup for packaging and stuff like that. They gave his trucks free parking so they would be on the lot and loaded up overnight.
Yeah, that's free. I like that.
Then in the winter, they had to switch sugar shacks because the lake they were using to fill up the barrels, it froze over. After a bit of time, a worker by the name of Pascal Patry became suspicious when he noticed water around some of the barrels and approached his boss, which was Caron. Avec paid Pascal 1,000 CAD, C8 Canadian dollars. Good thing I can edit this out. I look fucking Avec paid Pascal 1,000 Canadian dollars to keep quiet about it, and eventually was hired by the time to work for the heist. I can only imagine how that conversation went. Hey boss, I saw some water leaking out of a barrel. What gives? I don't know why I'm trying to do an accent. Water, you say? Look, I'll give you money and a job to not ask any more questions. Oh, this is dumb. Look, I don't know how conversations about bribes go. I've never been bribed, but if you would like to bribe me for research purposes, leave a comment down below. And while you're down there, subscribe. Now, back to the crime. And now Pascal worked for the Federation during the day and then at night stole from them. Because fuck them. Also, allegedly, another worker approached his boss about being suspicious about the amount of syrup coming in. His boss was none other than Richard This guy said that he told him it was stolen syrup, but later retracted that, so make of that what you will. As the operation went on, the group allegedly had a guy at the Federation who tipped them off about an inspection coming up at the end of July. I'm not sure if they got lazy or overzealous, or the inspection caught them by surprise, but they started cutting a lot of corners. They even went as far as not filling the barrels back up with water. The ones that were filled began to rust, and everything just kind of seemed to start falling apart. The group used those burner phones to text, and the only text I was able to find about the inspection coming up, it talked about how the barrels weren't put back in the same exact places, they were leaving rust circles on the floor, and they were going to leave the lights really low to help cover everything up. So during the inspection, they did just that, and the inspector started counting at some point, was climbing up on some barrels, and one of them tipped over and he fell. This was an immediate red flag since those barrels, when full, they weigh over 600 pounds. He started looking closer at everything, started tapping on some stuff, and found more empty barrels, and they launched an investigation. They found that over 9,500 barrels had been tampered with. The Federation already had a good idea of who it was, they just needed to prove it, and when they did...
Not surprising. Smiling. Again. I remember, I say again.
I fucking hate that guy. Those 9,500 barrels totaled 18 million Canadian dollars, and adjusted for inflation, $24 million or 17.6 million United States dollars. All those barrels totaled about 60% of the Federation's inventory. They cleaned them out. And during the investigation, they found the other sugar shacks used the drain and filled the barrel. They had the Federation sticker on them. But did you see the red one? Let's take a closer look at the red one. Right there. It has Richard's name on it. Like, I know everyone says criminals are dumb, but come the fuck on, bro. You're just gonna leave your name on the evidence. They didn't even have to look for it. It was right there. You left it on the top. They started arresting a lot of people, and the Federation sent the police to St. Pierre's Sugar Shack, and they took all of his syrup, every bit of it, cleaned it out. Didn't matter if they thought it came from him or not. You know, like, did I mention they were a legal cartel? That kind of sounds like some shit that a cartel would do. I'm just saying, I'm just pointing it out. I'm just here to tell you about this stuff. All in all, 17 people were arrested in connection with this, and the trials began in 2013. As the public learned about the heist through the trials, I learned lawyers also wear a robe thing, and it's similar to the one that's worn in the UK, but the UK, in some courts, you still have to wear a wig. That's just a little fun fact. Anyway, back to these guys going to jail. Raymond Valère is Richard's dad. He owned one of the warehouses, and he was convicted of possession and was sentenced to 2 years in jail minus 1 day, followed by 3 years of probation. Sebastian Jutros, the truck driver, served 8 months. Etienne St. Pierre, the guy that the Maple Mafia stole all of his shit, he was sentenced to 2 years in jail minus 1 day, 3 years of probation, and an $850,000 fine. He still claims he didn't know the syrup was stolen, but while researching this, I had a feeling that he did, just based on the fact that most of the syrup he bought was not stored in food-safe containers. And the people who sampled it, they all got sick. If that's not a red flag, I don't know what is. Avid Caron, the warehouse guy, he was sentenced to 5 years in prison plus a $1.2 million fine. Richard Valère Ruiz was called the ringleader by the people in the robes. His defense should have argued he wasn't smart enough to be the ringleader because he left his name on all the fucking barrels. But he was sentenced to 8 years in prison plus a $9.4 million fine, with a possible extension to 14 years in prison if the fine wasn't paid over 10 years. I would say that's the end of all of this, but just like with any court case, appeals. Valère appealed the fine, and in 2016, the Quebec Court of Appeal ruled that the fine was excessive and lowered it to $1 million. Because it was argued from the defense that he shouldn't be fined more than what he profited from the heist. But then, in 2022, the Supreme Court of Canada reversed the Court of Appeal's decision in a unanimous ruling and reinstated the original fine, stating that a court cannot limit the amount of a fine to the profit made by an offender. The Chief Justice explained that Parliament adopted that law to send a clear message that crime does not pay. I wonder if I've ever had any black market maple syrup. I mean, I imagine it tastes just like real syrup, but you know, with hookers and blow.